John Ulzheimer is known as one of our nation's most recognized credit experts. Having worked for 28 years in the credit industry, John has become one of the most prolific speakers about credit and the go-to authority on answers to credit-related questions. Credit Countdown with John Ulzheimer.
Hello, my name is John Ulzheimer, and I'm a consumer credit expert with 30 years of experience in the consumer credit industry. And today I'm going to answer a question that I get quite frequently. And that question is, hey, John, how do I establish credit for the first time? What would you do? What advice would you give me? And it's an interesting question because theoretically, you would have presumed that over time, the strategy for establishing credit would have changed. And reality is that it really hasn't. I'll give you an example. I established credit for the first time when I was 18 years old. My parents added me as an authorized user on a pre-existing credit card. I got my first loan, large loan, my first mortgage loan when I was in my very early 20s, and I bought a car, and I had to borrow money to buy a car. And so I had installment debt pretty early on in my 20s. I had credit cards very early on in my 20s, if not in my late teens, and that's how I established credit. So it's really not terribly difficult or terribly different today. There are still a very limited number of ways to build credit and establish credit, and they have their pros and their cons. But the one thing that you should consider is that you really only have one opportunity to establish credit for the first time. Other than that, you're either reestablishing credit or you're rebuilding your credit. So you really only have one chance to do it the first time, so you might as well do it right. So if I had it all to do over again, here's what I would do. First off, you're somewhat limited because you can't get a credit card when you're 18 years old any longer because of the CARD Act, which is the Credit Card Accountability, Responsibility, and Disclosure Act of 2009, which made it illegal for a credit card issuer to give somebody a credit card unless they were 21 or they had a job, which, I mean, nothing happens at age 21 that gives you some sort of a credit epiphany and makes you a good manager of credit. But nonetheless, that's the law of the land, and so you have to wait till you're 21 unless you have a cosigner or a job. What I would do, which is the same way I established credit for the first time, is I became an authorized user on one of my parents' credit cards, and that immediately established a credit report for me. It got at least one account on my credit report that was in good standing, and then over time I was able to essentially build off of that one account and establish my own credit and then benefit from using credit responsibly. If I were you, here are your ways to do it. You can become an authorized user on a pre-existing credit card. You can go out and try to borrow money on your own, either a loan or establish credit in your own name with a credit card issuer. Retail store credit cards are not that difficult to get, so that might be a good place to start. You could open a secured credit card, which is a credit card where you have to actually make a deposit with the bank, and then the bank issues you a credit card with a credit limit either equal to or very close to the deposit that you made. That's also not a bad way to establish credit. Those methods are fine. Just make sure that the lender or the credit card issuer reports to all three of the credit bureaus, or you're really spinning your wheels and you're not establishing credit because none of that information is making its way to your consumer credit reports. You can certainly take out what's called a credit builder loan, and a credit builder loan is essentially a very, very small dollar loan, usually less than $1,000, with a credit union, and the credit union has you repay it usually within less than a year, and every single month that you make the payment on the loan, they're reporting that activity to the credit reporting agencies. The loan, which this is going to be a little bit different than other loans, you don't get the money when you take out the loan initially. They deposit it in an interest accruing account, and then they give you the money plus any interest you earn once you get done paying off the loan. It really only has one purpose, which is to establish information on a credit report. And so those aren't a bad way of doing it. So those are all fairly easy and straightforward methods to establish credit. Here's some other things that I would do if I were you, maybe more from a consumer protection perspective than it is a establishing and building credit perspective. One of the things that you're going to learn, unfortunately, and that you're going to get to experience, unfortunately, as you kind of move through your credit life cycle and you have credit cards, is you're going to be a victim of fraud. You're not special. You shouldn't feel special. We're all the victims of credit card fraud at one time or another. Either someone's going to get your card number and use it without your permission, or someone's going to apply for credit in your name without your permission. And that's just almost like common. It's so common these days that it's almost really not that big of a deal any longer because federal law law really limits your liability to practically nothing. As long as you notify the credit card issuer that you've been the victim of fraud, you're never going to have to pay any of that money out of your pocket. But because fraud is such a big deal, here's what I would do after you get done establishing credit for the first time. And I really wouldn't wait very long. The minute you get anything on your credit reports, whether it's an authorized user account or it's a loan, I would immediately do two things. Number one is I would place a fraud alert on my credit reports. That's very easy to do. It's free. Essentially, all you're doing is you're notifying one of the 3 credit reporting agencies that you'd like to place a fraud alert. That reporting agency is obligated to communicate with the other 2 credit reporting agencies. And so really it's a one-stop shopping type of endeavor. And what they're going to do is they're going to get your contact information and then place the alert on your credit report. And then any future lender that sees that credit report is going to have to verify with you that you are in fact the person who applied for credit. So really it doesn't prevent the application from taking place, but what it does do is it prevents any of the loan underwriting from taking place because of the alert. Because clearly if you didn't apply for the account, you're going to let the lender know, hey, that's not me, I don't know what it is, and then they're going to stop the presses. That's number one. Number two is I would actually place a security freeze on all 3 of my credit reports. And so kind of the informal terminology for this is that I'm going to freeze my credit reports. This is also free. You're going to have to do this with each of the 3 credit reporting agencies independently. There is no one-stop shopping for placing a credit freeze on your credit reports. You're going to have to go to Equifax, you're going to have to go to Experian, you're going to have to go to TransUnion, all independently, and have them place the freeze on your credit reports. What this will do, this is actually fantastic. For all practical purposes, this will freeze out any new lenders from having access to your credit reports. And so unless you have a pre-existing relationship with a creditor, they cannot get access to your credit reports unless you give them permission to do so. And the way you do that is you essentially unfreeze or thaw your credit reports, which puts them back into commercial circulation. It allows lenders to pull them for underwriting. And so if you freeze your credit reports, even though you may be the target of identity theft and fraud, you will never be the victim of identity theft or fraud because the creditor won't get access to your credit reports, and therefore they will not be able to even see the report to underwrite a loan. The reason you'd want to do both, the fraud alert and the security freeze, is almost like 2-layer protection. So you have like or 2-step authentication in some of your online accounts. This is almost the equivalent of 2-step authentication for securing your credit reports. Not only are you going to have to thaw the credit reports, but even then, once the lender gets access to them, they're going to see the alert, and then they're going to still have to verify with you that you are the person who has applied for credit. So that's what I would do. That's how I would establish credit for the very first time, and then that's how I would protect my credit reports after they have been established. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. I'll do my best to answer them, and thank you very much for watching. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks a lot.
For more videos and credit tips from John Ulzheimer, go to www.tradelinesupply.com.